Well, good morning, everybody. It's going to be a tough act to follow, indeed. I'd like to thank Kit and Chuck and anybody else that was organizing this, and I always enjoy coming out here. This year, 2024, marks the sesquicentennial of three named composers. One is Arnold Schoenberg, okay? One is Charles Ives, and one is Gustav Holst. And since Holst happened to be with me the last 43 years of my life, I figured I'd talk about Holst instead of Schoenberg or Ives, and hopefully that's all right. So anyhow, this is Gustav Holst's 1932 trip to North America, and there's a lot of interaction with the band world here. Almost without exception, this is the last picture of Holst taken in 1934. 1932, he would have looked something similar to this. So almost without exception, 1931 had been a disappointing year for Holst. He had three solid pieces: Hammersmith, which he composed for the BBC military band, a choral fantasia, and a chamber opera, The Tale of the Wandering Scholar. All three of these did not do well. He also wrote a film score for a movie called The Bells. And The Bells, it turned out, was, I guess, only taken up by 9 movie theaters in England. And it has totally disappeared. Nobody knows where it is. There are a couple sketches for it. And that's, I don't know, one of the pieces I'd like to find. Anyhow, it's no wonder then when he was offered the chance to come to the United States for 6 months as the Horatio Appleton Lamb Foundation lecturer in composition at Harvard University, he decided, hey, this is pretty good. His salary for one semester's work was $3,000. Well, think about it, okay? 1930, the average family income in the United States was $2,300. He was paid $3,000 for one semester's work, and all he had to do was teach composition students. That was it. So, you know, what a deal. Well, hearing about this, the Boston Symphony conductor, Serge Koussevitzky, so this will be the next slide here. Serge Koussevitzky, who had been in charge of the Boston Symphony since 1924, invited Holst to come and guest conduct. Usually in January, Koussevitzky would take off for a couple of weeks and have composers who were also conductors in to conduct the Boston Symphony. So, anyhow, Holst came across the Atlantic on a German registry ship, the Bremen, and he arrived 5 days later. And the next morning he was met in Boston by Archibald and Dorothy Davison. Archibald Davison was conductor of the Harvard Glee Club and was a prominent professor, of course, at Harvard University. So, anyhow, Holst's first concert with the Boston Symphony was not in Boston, but it was at the Albee Theater in Providence, Rhode Island. Okay, and the Albee, you can see the inside of this. Is quite a place. Okay, and this is where the Providence Orchestra rehearsed as well. But the Boston Symphony usually had about 6 or 8 out concerts. Some would be in Worcester, some would be in Providence. And so anyhow, his first concert was at the Albee Theater. He conducted the Symphony 103 by Haydn, the Drum Roll Symphony, and all the other remaining works were by Holst, including St. Paul's Suite, which has the same Fantasia on the Dargazon that the second suite in F has, Somerset Rhapsody, and then the orchestral arrangements of 2 military band works, Hammersmith and Bach's Fugue à la Gigue. Okay, so the concert was very well received. The remaining 2 concerts took place at Symphony Hall in Boston, and this time the programming was all Holst. St. Paul's Suite, ballet music from The Perfect Fool, Hammersmith, that was the first half. Second half was The Planets. So critics were impressed. And Philip Hale, who was the Boston Symphony critic for close to 40 years, said this about Hammersmith. He said, Hammersmith gives Mr. Holst a high position in the rank of contemporaneous composers. This is not program music in the anecdotal or pictorial sense. There are two moods, eloquent and total expression. The searcher after symbolism in all art might say, nature heals of mortals' joys or sorrows. But Mr. Holst, a thinker even outside of music, and this cannot be said of every composer, a man fascinated by the poetry and philosophy of India, when he girds up his loins to write music, is first of all a musician. Well, he was warmly received, and it was really a wonderful experience for Holst. Anyhow, moving along, we can see just a cartoon from the Boston transcript, and Holst urge into curve. Okay. Another reason for Holst's coming was that his brother was an actor in America. His brother was Emil von Holst, that's the original name. He was born in 1876. He was 2 years younger than Gustav Holst. But Emil had run away at the age of 16. First, he was a clerk in a liquor store, and then second, he went to South Africa. He became an actor and traveled around the English-speaking world in various plays and whatever, and ended up in New York. And Ernest Cossart, you might recognize him. After Holst's death in 1935, he went to Hollywood, and he was in 40 different motion pictures. Okay, he was Ginger Rogers' father. He was Ronald Reagan's father-in-law. He was Tom Klink, the chimney sweep in the Tower of London, right alongside Vincent Price and Boris Karloff. So anyhow, but his specialty was playing the butler, and he loved being a butler, and it's just the way that it was. But anyhow, Holst got to spend a lot of time with his brother and with his niece, Valerie, so it was wonderful. So, on February 1st, 1932, Holst had dinner with Edwin Franco Goldman. And Goldman, of course, was the founder and conductor of the Goldman Band. And he was at the forefront of, bands in America, bands in the world even, commissioning more works than, anybody else. And Goldman was reminded about Hammersmith. And there was a request by Captain Hayward, who was the bandmaster of the Toronto Concert Band. And he had written to Boosey and Hawkes looking for pieces. Goldman had seen Hammersmith, he'd seen the score, and he said, hey, this is a great piece. And Goldman and Holst talked back and forth, and Goldman said, okay, I want you to come April 17th to Washington, D.C., to the American Bandmasters Association convention, and I want you to conduct Hammersmith. And Holst was thrilled. He thought, okay, this is great, we'll do this. However, he had a little bit of a problem in that he had to get the okay from the BBC military band in London. And the BBC military band was the band that he wrote Hammersmith for. So he thought, okay, I'm writing, I have a chance to perform it. Hasn't been performed yet in England. Can I get it done here? And the answer was, absolutely. So, anyhow, let's move on. Josh? Okay. So, here's a letter, and this isn't too good, but you might be able to see some of this. Dear Mr. Goldman, he's writing back to Goldman. Thank you for sending the score in your kind letter. This is interesting too. I have written a bass clarinet part and hope to do the others in a few days. Am I right in thinking that the soprano saxophone is in B flat, the baritone saxophone in E flat, and the alto clarinet in E flat in unison with the alto saxophone? If I am wrong, would you kindly let me know? And so this proves that Gustav Holst wrote extra parts to Hammersmith. For those of you who have ever done Hammersmith or studied the piece, you'll know that it just has the British military band instrumentation from 1930. And a lot of earlier band directors in the United States refused to play it, refused to even look at it, because they considered it to be an incomplete piece, written for a specific wind ensemble. And the thing is, it's just the difference between what is called British listing and American listing, okay? And here Holst certainly, proof that he had this in mind. And in fact, he actually preferred American list. He said, another point that struck me, if the score is published, we must decide whether it shall be British or American list. At present, I rather favor the latter. This need not be discussed yet. So, interesting stuff. Holst is looking forward to this and looking forward to getting Hammersmith out there, and that's where we are. Okay, let's go on, Josh. Okay, Nathaniel Shilkret was quite a character. Okay, in 1924, he was the head of the light music at RCA Victor, and you can see NBC, he was there also. He organized a jazz orchestra similar to what Paul Whiteman had for Rhapsody in Blue, okay? And that was an insane year, 1924. Well, Shilkret was, really, really something. He gave perhaps 3,000 concerts with his band. It's really, something else. Made all sorts of recordings. Holst wrote to his niece, Veli Lasker, about meeting Nathaniel Shilkret. And here's what he had to say. Life continues to be fantastic. This morning I had breakfast with the man who makes more money in music than anyone else in the world. As expected, he turned out to be quite nice and simple and straight. He wants me to write a piece for his band, which consists of 17 strings, 1 flute, 1 oboe, 1 clarinet, 1 bassoon, 4 saxophones, 2 horns, 3 cornets, 2 trombones, tuba, 2 pianos, harp, 2 trap set drummers, and a banjo. So it's quite a group. So he enjoyed really his time in New York, and then went back to Boston because he had to go back to Harvard University. This is Eliot House at Harvard University. This was brand new. This dates from 1931. It was brand new when Holst was there, and Holst stayed at Eliot House. So a piano was brought. He was actually staying in a suite there. A piano was brought into his suite. He composed a work called 6 Choruses, Opus 53, while he was there. And among his students was Elliott Carter, okay, famous composer, long-living composer, 1908 to 2012. Okay, he also had Henry Leland Clark as a student there, but he described his class at Harvard. This is interesting. I've had a most disappointing class. Half of them away and half of them the other half bringing no work. These people have learned almost as much as I have forgotten. It feels impertinent to tell them anything because they know everything, in theory, much better than I. They're humble and diffident and full of inhibitions, and I've only got one thing to say to them, and that is write and write and write more. So he talks about this at length in other letters. He talks about, what's the matter with the American system of educating, what's going on? These people know all these facts and figures and stuff like that, but they're unable to put things down on paper. They're unable to sum things up, okay? And this bothered him quite a bit. Okay, let's go on. On March 9th, Holst set out from Boston on a 4-day trip that included Montreal and New York. So he went up to McGill University, where a former student of his, Douglas Clark, was conductor of the orchestra there. And he was invited to conduct Mars, but he ended up conducting Jupiter instead for some reason. I have no idea what that's about. So here, this isn't too good, but you can see, English Visitor and a nice article about Holst in the Montreal newspaper. So he went back to New York, and in New York he took advantages of a place called the Beethoven Association. The Beethoven Association sounds wonderful, doesn't it? And they had a wonderful building where people could stay, composers could stay. They had meals there and everything else. It was a great place. It went out of business in 1940. But Holst stayed there, and he was able to do things. So, at the second half of the semester, in addition to his teaching, Holst had at least 8 events scheduled on his plate for the not too distant future. He had a Haydn lecture at the Library of Congress, March 26th, a concert of his own works for Harvard, April 14th, the premiere of the military band version of Hammersmith, okay, at the ABA conference in Washington, D.C., a return trip to Montreal sometime. The composition, Nathaniel Schildkrit wanted him to write a piece for his band. He had that. He had a music supervisors national conference address in Cleveland. That's MENC, or now NAFME. And then ultimately, a transcontinental train ride across Canada from Vancouver Island to Quebec. So he had all these things lined up. Well, his DC trip started out well, okay? And he gave a lecture there at the Library of Congress. He stayed at the Hotel Continental, but after his lecture, he felt faint. He did not feel well, okay? And in a weakened state, Holst took the 5 o'clock train from New Jersey to from Washington, D.C. to New Jersey to Boston. He had a miserable night on the train. Dr. Townsend, who had tended to help him earlier, saw him, took him to the New England Deaconess Hospital in Boston. Once there, he was diagnosed with hemorrhagic gastritis, a duodenal ulcer, brought on by all sorts of things. He remained there for 16 days. He wrote to Vaughan Williams, "I learned the real meaning of the phrase, a bloody nuisance." In the meantime, plans were being made for the ABA convention and the concert that was going to be there. Holst's announcement was, he was announced in the press, and all sorts of wonderful things. Considerable attention will be directed to all bandmasters and by all bandmasters in the United States to the convention of the American Bandmasters Association during the month of April, and the star performance will be that of Mr. Gustav Holst's Hammersmith, which he has specially composed for military band and which will receive its first world performance by a picked band of 80. There is little doubt that the American Bandmasters Association is making great strides with military band music in America. It has set a high standard, and performance such as that of Hammersmith will be a unique experience. Hammersmith will shortly be published by Messrs. Boozy and Hawkes Limited. The orchestral and military band parts and scores are now available for hire. Hammersmith was finally published in 1956. Okay, took a long time. This you might have seen before. This is part of the program from that ABA conference. And it turned out that Sousa was supposed to conduct, John Philip Sousa. He died shortly after. He conducted a rehearsal of the Ringgold Band, went to his room in the Lincoln Hotel in downtown Reading and had a heart attack and died. Okay, March 6, 1932. So the concert became a memorial to Sousa. Okay, and we can see Sousa, Funeral March, U.S. Field Artillery March, Washington Post, El Capitan, and Stars and Stripes Forever. And this was, just terrible. Sousa was supposed to conduct his leaves from a notebook, and it just didn't work, of course. As we move along, Holst was supposed to be 7th on this program. Prelude and Scherzo Hammersmith, United States Marine Band, conducted by the composer. Okay? It turned out that Holst was still in Boston. He had just been released from the hospital. He was spending the next couple of weeks with Archibald Davison and his wife. He could not go, okay? So he was in a weakened state, and the person who ended up conducting this was the captain of, or the leader of the Marine Band, and it was Captain Taylor Branson. Instead, Holst ended up staying in Boston. There was a concert given by the Harvard Glee Club and the Radcliffe Choral Society for, in honor of him. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. He talks about that concert. He said, "That was the happiest night I've had in the United States. It was like Morley College, where he taught on a large scale. These youngsters sang some of my things by heart. One can't have a higher compliment than that. And the first trumpet of the Boston Symphony Orchestra wanted to return his fee." So he was really pleased with that. He finally settled down on May 1st to start conducting, or start writing his piece for Nathaniel Shilkret. This is Shilkret's band. Okay, interesting to look at. We've got single strings, single winds. We've got the recording bass in the back. Just a wonderful, wonderful piece. Holst wasn't sure what to name the piece. He had Mr. Shilkret's Dump, Mr. Shilkret's Folly, Mr. Shilkret's Maggot. He eventually just referred to it as his jazz band piece. Shilkret asked Holst to write a piece based upon American folk songs. Holst said, "I don't want to do that, I'll use my own themes." So he wrote a piece using his own themes, and Shilkret rejected the piece because of that reason. Anyhow, it's really a weird jazz band piece, so to speak, that starts off with a viola solo. So he started out on that, and that's where we are. So he left Cambridge May 22nd, headed out to Ann Arbor, Michigan. The University of Michigan had, for a long time, had this May Festival where they would actually bring in, not the Detroit Symphony, they would bring in the Chicago Symphony with Frederick Stock, the conductor there. And you know, you can see Holst here being one of the featured soloists, featured conductors, and everything else. So he was very happy to do that. There was one more concert that involved Holst, and this was held at Symphony Hall. It was a Boston Pops. It was Harvard night at the Boston Pops. And we've got Arthur Fiedler conducting. Fiedler, by the way, played bells for Holst on The Planets just a couple of months earlier. So we've got, of course, this picture of Holst, which went everywhere. That was advertised. That was sketched by William Rothenstein in 1920. Archibald Davidson, the conductor of the Harvard Glee Club. And we have Jesus Maria San Roman, the Boston Pops pianist. He was, I don't know, something like 300 Boston Pops concerts. Friend of Fiedler's, you know. And here's a picture, an early, well, kind of an ad hoc picture of the Harvard Glee Club from that time. So there we are. Anyhow, Holst was very, very pleased with the time that he spent in North America. I say North America because he did go to Montreal as well as the United States. And went home. He had only another year and a half to live. He had complications from what happened to him here. And so he died in May of 1934, but had a great trip in 1932, his third trip. So there we are.
John, explain quickly the pieces that we will hear by Holst this afternoon.
Okay, this afternoon, James Causley Windrum who was head of the, he was captain, he was the military leader of the band of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers in England, asked Holst if he could transcribe some pieces that he really liked. And these were hymns from the Rig Veda that Holst had composed for, well, he had composed 4 groups of these hymns. Some were for male voice and orchestra, the others for female voice and harp. And he took, Windrum took 3 of these and arranged them for military band. I edited these. They were published in 2017 by Boozy and Hawkes. However, I was asked by the editor to replace the second one, the Hymn to Vena. He said, oh, these woodwind parts, they're not quite going to work. Could you arrange something else? And so what we've got then that was published were 2 of Windrum's movements and a slow movement that I edited. The Hymn to Vena was not included, and I think it's probably the best of the 3 movements in certain ways, at least aesthetically. And so we're going to read through that this afternoon. So there we are.
Thanks, John. Any questions? Jerry?
Yeah, John, I'm interested in the viola solo in the jazz piece. Was that a nod to Whiteman, who played viola professionally before he started his jazz group?
No.
And did it sound like a Whiteman piece?
No, it sounds like a Holst piece. There's no real jazz in it. But yeah, I don't know anything about it, about that, and you know, you might be absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, John?
I'm very honored to have played on the world premiere recording of Hammersmith with Fred Fennell in 1958.
Oh,
That
wonderful.
first trumpet fanfare, me.
No kidding, John.
Oh,
That's
wonderful.
something.
Yeah, I'm a fossil, yes.
Always a pleasure, I should say an honor and a pleasure to be in front of you and conduct you. What I wanted to do was look at Hymn to Vena. Okay, the very first thing. What this is James Causley Windrum, who was responsible for getting Holst's first suite published, was interested in Holst's music, wrote to Holst, said, hey, I'd like to transcribe a couple of the pieces that you've done for chorus and orchestra, or chorus and harp. And so what this is, Hymn to Vena, was originally from Holst, a piece for female chorus and harp. And Windrum, who was band director of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers at the time in England, transcribed it for band. And most of you have Windrum's parts. Some of you have parts that have been, well, put into proper keys by me long ago. So anyhow, Windrum did 3 of these. Okay, Battle Hymn, this one, Hymn of the Travelers. Okay, I did an edition that was published back in 2017. However, the editors, meaning Craig Kirchhoff at Ohio State, who was in charge of things, said, I don't like the second movement. Can you replace it? And so I did my own version of something called Hymn to Manas. The thing is, Hymn to Vena has never been published. And so I like it. You may not. We'll find out. But this will be a complete change from March, of course. Any E-flat clarinet cues that you have, please read. Any second bassoon cues, anything, yeah, that you don't have, just do the best you can with it. And we'll see what happens. Okay, what we have, alto sax is here, okay, tenor, okay, and the horns, okay. So, here we go, everybody, do the best that you can with it. This is slow. At the key change, there is a key change. What do we have? 6 flats, 7 flats?
7.
Wonderful stuff. There we go. Right there. Yeah. Tough piece to sight read, everybody. Very happy that you got through it and that we ended up on the right chord. Okay. Not that the last one didn't sound like a bad one. Friendly 5 more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what this will be, okay, for the most part.